Good morning. Good morning. I hope you had a good night, a restful night. For those joining this morning, we did have a short introduction last night. So we're pretty much jumping in this morning, but one thing just to repeat from last night, then when I am referring to mysticism, I'm using the Benedictine sense from the prologue of, as we progress on this path, we run with our hearts overflowing with the inexpressible delight of love. So the mark of a mystic is one who is growing in love, love of God, love of self, love of others. And the other thing is that you will receive a handout at the end of the session that has a lot of the information that I'm talking about the woman. Use it if it's helpful. Just pitch it if it's not helpful. But it's like, I don't have questions on it for reflection. It's just so you have the information on the woman if that's helpful to you. Mary Magdalene. This morning we're dealing with Mary Magdalene, the apostle to the apostle, and Lectio prayer. So Mary Magdalene is near and dear to my heart. The small Catholic worker that I was a part of was named Mary the Apostle, using Mary Magdalene's title. The crucial story to know about Mary Magdalene as a mystic is from the Gospel of John. She's central in the main story of Jesus's resurrection. She goes to the tomb, remember, on that morning to care for Jesus's body. She finds the stone rolled away and runs for others. Peter and John run to the tomb, go in, find it empty except for the linen wrappings. Then they return to their own homes. Mary stayed alone, weeping, probably wailing. She stooped and looked inside. She saw two angels, one at the head and one at the foot where Jesus's body had been. They asked her why she's weeping. As she answers, she turns away and sees one she thinks is the gardener. She leaves the angels and goes to the gardener as the better source of an answer. She might be the only person in Scripture who turns away from angels mid-message. She is that focused, that passionate, that determined to find Jesus, to find Jesus's body. She is not interested in anything else. And she begs the one she thinks he is gardener. And as she's begging him to bring back Jesus's body, he calls her by name. And then she knows him instantly. That tender, intimate, beautiful encounter between Mary and the risen Christ is one of the best, is one of the most important encounters in Scripture, and is that mystical moment. Mary's life is changed. She is commissioned to announce the good news, and she does. She is commissioned to go and tell others, and she does so immediately. One other thing just to mention, that this beautiful passage is not included in our lectionary. It's skipped over in our Sunday lectionary. It's skipped over and read on Easter Tuesday. We know that Mary Magdalene is a leading figure in all four of the Gospels. The Gospel of Luke tells us of the women who served Jesus. The 12 accompanied him, and also some women who had been cured of evil spirits and maladies. Mary, called the Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had gone out. Joanna, the wife of Herod's steward Chusa, Susanna, and many others who were assisting them out of their means. So these were the women that were making Jesus's revolution possible, right? They were funding it, and they were doing the logistics. They were providing the hospitality. They were funding the revolution. The reference to being cured of 7 demons, Mary Magdalene being cured of seven demons, it's speculated by some that that's a code for spiritual maturity, that she was freed from from being trapped by all 7 of the demons or thoughts that were later called the 7 capital sins. So she had been released from bondage to all 7 of them. So many think that is a code. Being cured of 7 demons is a code for her spiritual maturity. All 4 Gospels mention that Mary Magdalene followed Jesus in his ministry and was present at his crucifixion and death. I always I always heard when I was growing up that the women and children, that the women could be at the crucifixion because they didn't have the same risk of being crucified. We now know that women and children were crucified by the Roman Empire. So for the women to be at the foot of the cross, identifying with Jesus, was to risk the same punishment. And in all four Gospels, Mary is the first witness of the resurrection. In Matthew and John's Gospel, she sees the risen Christ. In all four, she is charged with proclaiming Christ's resurrection to the apostles, hence her traditional title, Apostle to the Apostles. The Gospel of Mary is one of the non-canonical texts, and it's thought to refer to Mary Magdalene. In the Gospel of Mary, Mary Magdalene is a leader, a teacher, and receives visions and teachings of Christ that had not been revealed to others. A conflict between Mary and Peter as two leaders in the early church is present in this gospel and in other non-canonical gospels. Just the second part of the handout that you get this morning is the main fragment that we have from that Gospel of Mary. We don't have the full thing, but I thought it's interesting. You might want to spend some time reflecting on it. There's a strong tradition that when the apostles departed from Jerusalem to preach to the ends of the earth, Mary Magdalene also went to preach to the ends of the earth. She went to Rome, and there's a strong tradition that she visited the Emperor Tiberius and proclaimed Christ's resurrection. According to tradition, she brought him a red egg as a symbol of the resurrection, a symbol of the new life, with the words, Christ is risen. She then told the Emperor Tiberius that in his province of Judea, his appointed procurator, Pontius Pilate, had unjustly condemned and executed Jesus the Galilean, a holy man, a healer, powerful before God and all the people. That story is the reference for Mary Magdalene's often being depicted with a red egg in icons. Mary Magdalene continued her preaching in Italy and in the city of Rome itself. Scholars think that she is the one mentioned by Paul in his letter to the Romans, where he expresses gratitude to Mary, who has bestowed much labor on us. According to tradition, she remained in Rome until the arrival of Paul, and for 2 years following his departure from Rome after his first court judgment. From Rome, St. Mary Magdalene, when she was older, moved to Ephesus, where the Apostle John was laboring, and there she died and was buried. For millennia, Mary Magdalene's leadership and strength as a disciple were hidden from us. She was conflated with the penitent woman who washed Jesus's feet. She was described by Pope St. Gregory the Great as a prostitute. This description took hold in the Western Church, and it became her primary identification. In the Orthodox Church, she was always celebrated with the title Apostle to the Apostles, and her feast in the Orthodox Church was celebrated at the same level as a feast of the other apostles. In June of 2016, Pope Francis celebrated the celebration of St. Mary Magdalene from a memorial to this same level of feast as an apostle. And the decree for this from Pope Francis was titled Apostle to the Apostles. So the Western Church is becoming more in line with the Orthodox Church in this. It is wonderful to celebrate that as a feast. Clearly, in our time, she is being rediscovered for the strong leader and faithful disciple that she was. When we think of women and women mystics, Mary Magdalene embodies I think, the prayer form of Lectio. She experienced the word, she announced it. She heard the word and became it. She wrote the word with her life. In the resurrection story, she is so in tune, so attuned with the one she loves that she doesn't give up until she finds him. So I connect Mary with Lectio prayer. So Lectio prayer. I sort of hesitate to offer Lectio as a prayer form for Benedictines because you know it so well. It's the foundation of our spiritual practice. But sometimes, especially on retreat, it's helpful to focus again on a practice that's very familiar. So I'll barge ahead. The essence of Lectio, the shorthand for Lectio is one movement. Bringing into the heart and bringing out. I think of a mantra written by our sister Mary Lou Kanaki. If today I hear God's voice, may I not resist a softer, more compassionate heart. If today I hear God's voice, may I not resist a softer, more compassionate heart. That's really the essence of Lectio, right? Bringing into the heart, responding from the heart. Lectio was taught, Lectio came to us from the early desert monastics. And as they were teaching their students to pray, how to spend their days, they taught them to pray the Psalms at these times of the day. And the rest of the times of the day, you sit, you pray through the whole day. So they would tell them you meditate, you memorize passages of scripture, and as you're doing your gardening or as you're doing your handwork, you're sitting down and you're doing your handwork and you're reciting the scripture, but you're listening with your heart to a passage or a word or something that pulls at your heart. Maybe it's something that like explodes like you've never heard it before, or it's just very beautiful, or all of a sudden you question it, or something calls your attention to this. But again, it's a heart attention. They taught at that point, put down your work and just keep repeating that phrase or line, chewing on it. What's this saying to me? Why is this drawing it? What's this calling to me right now? What does this say to me in my life right now? What's the meaning? Why am I drawn to this? And then after they chewed on it for a while, they would stand up and offer a response to God in prayer. Respond to God in prayer in some way. And then they would prostrate and just be in silent stillness. Just be in stillness with that whole experience with the word until they got distracted, because they knew they would get distracted. And sometimes that happens in 5 seconds and sometimes it happens in 5 minutes. But as soon as they started wondering, what's for lunch, then they would get up, pick up their handiwork and start again, doing their gardening, continuing the recitation of their memorized scripture. This practice went on through the whole day. That's how they spent their day. And that's really the practice that has come down to us as Lectio. So reading, chewing, finding the meaning, praying, being in silence, and fleshing it, incarnating it in our lives. Benedict doesn't really say much about Lectio, but what he does say is important. As in the other rules before Benedict, there was a specific time in the monastic horarium for Lectio, by that point, they were doing work that was too complex, but that was more complex. So they didn't just have the manual labor reciting the scripture from memory all day. So they had a time set apart. But what Benedict did was he moved that time set apart to the morning, before the assigned tasks, before the heat of the day, before they went out in the fields. So they gave the best part of the day when they were freshest to Lectio. So when we structure Lectio in our individual lives, that's something to look at. You know, when are we freshest? When does this work in our lives? And there's not a, you know, for us, it's not so much a set time as what time works for me. We know that Benedict had a system of the elders circulating during through the monastery during Lectio time to make sure that none were engaged in idle talk, especially murmuring instead of Lectio, and to encourage the younger monastics. Point, in Benedictine community, we support each other in our Lectio practice. It might be, sometimes it's formally, sometimes it's informally, but we find ways to support each other in this practice. And I know that that associates and oblates do this as well. It's a little more difficult for them to seek out those conversations when it's more easy when you're living with people to just talk about your Lectio, you know, or if somebody's on to a new book or a new experience, it comes up more naturally, informally. So, but that supporting each other in the practice over a lifetime is really important in community. Finally, the rule of Benedict mentions Lectio. It says monastics are to leave themselves free for Lectio, or give themselves over to their reading. I think that freedom is a really important part of Lectio. Lectio is not a static process. It's not a rigid prayer form. It's intentional space in our lives kept free for encounter with God. Freedom is the essence of Lectio that's often missed in the description. Of course, when we're teaching it, we have to teach it as a form. But once we're living it, just to remind ourselves of that freedom. Lectio is a prayer of the heart, and the heart needs freedom. And for different people and for different times in our lives, we need different Lectio practices. So follow your heart and be free in listening and responding. Many people think that freedom extends to the material for Lectio, beyond scripture, to sacred texts, to poetry, to art, to music, to movement, to nature. So again, just make sure that it's easy for any of us to put ourselves in a box and go on remote pilot. And retreat time is a really good time for us to just reflect on where our heart is calling us. So today I want to just have a real simple practice of Lectio, and because we're in silence, we're not going to do this as a group Lectio, but I am going to read a scripture once, and then we'll pause, and then I'll read it again. Okay, so just 2 times, and then because we're in silence, we'll just stay in silence, and you can leave whenever you feel called, move to leave. There are handouts on the first table, so take a handout on the way out. And the first time I read this, think more about, what am I hearing? Is there something that pulls at my heart for some reason? What am I being drawn to? We'll have some silence, and then I'll read it again. And then just think more deeply about what's the meaning in my life, or is there a response from the heart that I'm being called to? And after that second time, we'll just stay in silence and leave whenever you feel. And we're going to use the scripture from John, the resurrection scripture of Mary. A reading from the Gospel of John. Meanwhile, Mary stood weeping beside the tomb. Even as she wept, she stooped to peer inside, and there she saw two angels in dazzling robes. One was seated at the head, and the other at the foot of the place where Jesus' body had lain. They asked her, "Why are you weeping?" "Because they have taken away my rabbi, and I don't know where they have put his body." No sooner had she said this than she turned around and caught sight of Jesus standing there, but she didn't know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? For whom are you looking?" Thinking that he was the gardener, Mary said, "Please, if you are the one who carried Jesus away, tell me where you've laid the body, and I will take it away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni." Jesus said to her, "Don't hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to my God. Rather, go to the sisters and brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene came and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord," and announced that he had said these things to her. A reading from the Gospel of John. Meanwhile, Mary stood weeping beside the tomb. Even as she wept, she stooped to peer inside, and there she saw two angels in dazzling robes. One was seated at the head and the other at the foot of the place where Jesus' body had lain. They asked her, "Why are you weeping?" "Because they have taken away my rabbi, and I don't know where they have put the body." No sooner had she said this than she turned around and caught sight of Jesus standing there, but she didn't know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? For whom are you looking?" Thinking that he was the gardener, Mary said, "Please, if you are the one who has carried Jesus away, Tell me where you've laid the body, and I will take it away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said in Hebrew, "Rabboni." Jesus said to her, "Don't hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to my God. Rather, go to the sisters and brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene came and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord," and announced that he had said these things to her.